I felt so much mastery and presence, even though it was such a simple practice that you just taught us, really embodying that sense of healing and joy.
It's certainly something, when you can be at that much peace with yourself.
Are very involved in creating in our lives in order to optimize the conditions outside of us, relationships and work and career and practice itself. But behind it all is this innate sense of joy and ease, and that's something that never goes away. We lose sight of it. So hopefully that's a reminder of the simplicity of being able to tap into that.
All right. Welcome in to Conscious Conversations. I'm your host, Nick Palladino King, with my co-host, Nithin Garg.
Hey.
Hey. And today we have the very special pleasure and honor of interviewing Rod Stryker. Rod, welcome to the show. All right. And so just a little insight on Rod. Rod is he's a teacher's teacher. He's an author, a yoga teacher, a speaker. He's a world-renowned meditation and yoga educator. He's also the founder of Tantra Yoga Alchemy and the author of 2 books, including The 4 Desires and the soon-to-be-released Enlightened Sleep. Rod is actually a teacher of both Nithin and ours teachers. So there's some lineage here that we're really excited to experience and talk about and work through. But Rod, we'd love for you to kind of start us off with a light meditation, something to help us all get focused and grounded and prepared to be as present as we can. And then we'd love to learn about you and your teachings and how we can use yoga as a way to make our lives more full and enriched.
Beautiful. It's a conversation I'm looking forward to. So but first take a few minutes just to get centered and become more established in the moment. So if you would, let's begin just by finding a comfortable seated position. If you're in a chair or whatnot, the idea would be to get your spine as tall and the crown of your head over the base of your spine, something like that. And I'll invite everyone just to close their eyes, as I will. And we'll just begin by making this subtle shift from the outside focus to an internal focus. I invite you to just first find your breath. Sometimes that turning to the breath is itself a discovery, and we become aware of how we have been breathing unconsciously. And as we even just turn to it in the first few seconds, we'll begin to notice that the breath will slowly start to become more balanced and more coherent. So just let's begin there. So the body is stable and calm. The breath finding its own innate rhythm of balance and greater sense of harmony. And now let's take about 5 or 6 slow, smooth breaths. And as we do it, to consciously invite the breath to impact the spine. So as we breathe in, sense the spine growing taller. And as we breathe out, an internal sense of greater alignment between the various sections of the spine. So as we're breathing in, the spine grows vertically. And as we breathe out, a greater sense of alignment, of harmony. One more slow, smooth breath, please. And then let's allow the breath just to find its own natural rhythm again, completely involuntary. You're no longer shaping your breath. So now what I'll ask us all to do is just to take a few moments to begin to conceive of what's called sahaja. Sahaja means born with. This is the innate ease and freedom that we were all born with, that we all have, that is innate. And perhaps the easiest way just to remember that is just to remember the feeling of a smile, the sense of buoyancy and ease and contentment that no one had to teach us. So you can literally just bring your awareness to the mouth, and without changing your facial expression, just remember the feeling of a smile. Then bring that same feeling experience to the physical heart. And sensing the heart beating. And if it's helpful, you can remember these two words, very simple: healing and joy. Healing and joy. So you feel healing and joy in the physical heart. When you're ready, move to the lungs. To any area of the body that you know is either pained or there's tension or any aspect of dis-ease. And finally, your whole body, like one giant smile, the whole body experiencing itself as an abode of healing and joy. And lastly, the place, the space around the body, healing and joy.
And Rod, thanks so much for that meditation. I felt so much mastery and presence, even though it was such a simple practice that you just taught us, really embodying that sense of healing and joy. Nathan, how about yourself? What did you notice?
Yes, similar. I mean, I stayed with that sense of healing and joy as I was going through the different body parts, and finally actually sensing the whole body. That's an experience as well. You know, as you continue to deepen, as we continue to deepen into our presence and really slow down, and the breath continues to slow down, and that as you come into contact with your whole being, your whole physical presence. It's certainly something, you know, when you can be at that much peace with yourself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's a reminder, I hope, that we don't have to go far. You know, there's so much that we are very involved in creating in our lives in order to optimize the conditions outside of us, relationships and work and career and practice itself, you know. But behind it all is this innate sense of joy and ease. And that's something that never goes away. We lose sight of it. So hopefully that's a reminder of the simplicity of being able to tap into that.
Yeah, simple works. Rod, can you tell us a little bit about how you've cultivated this and some of your experience as becoming a practitioner and a teacher and eventually a master? It'd be really interesting to know how you've created this in yourself and some of your journey that's brought you to where you are.
You know, I much prefer conversation, so I want to keep this thing short. And it's, you know, obviously I've been doing this for 43 years, so it's easy to get wound up in the biography, and I don't want to do that. The short version of it is that I think I'm not different than anybody else in the sense that
the beginning of the Hatha Yoga Pradipika describes that these teachings of yoga, specifically Hatha, Asana, Bandha, Mudra, etc., are for the purpose of those who have been scorched by the three fires. And the three fires are the three forms of suffering: physical pain, mental and emotional pain, or spiritual pain. And I was too young at the time, I think, to have any physical pain, but already at the age of 19 or something, I had felt it, And even probably earlier than that, I was feeling some kind of separation. It's why when I went to college, I studied psychology and philosophy. In those days, the humanities still existed at the university level. They almost don't anymore. They're dying, But you could still have a lot of careers as philosophers, and perhaps, and certainly psychology was one of the areas I was most interested in. But I left school in my junior year because I grew, I don't know, I just lost interest. I really didn't sense like this was going to be I was going to find what I was looking for. And I remember doing yoga the very first time. And I found more in that first yoga class in my apartment, all alone, with Iyengar's book, Light on Yoga. And I had an experience that very first time that I was looking for in my philosophy and psychology. And, and it was tactile, and it was real, and it was immediate. And it was like, holy smokes, this is the encapsulation of philosophy. And then I would fast forward the tape and just say 3 years later, I met a tantric yoga master, and he lit my world on fire. And I was no longer just doing asana. I began to meditate, and I just wanted to learn more. And then in my desire to learn more, I decided I would teach to learn more, not to become a teacher. And then in a short period of time, they invited me to become like his first American student. This was 1980. And, one thing led to another, and, a spark became a fire, and a fire became what it became. And then I met all of these amazing, wonderful people who wanted to learn what I had learned, and as you guys did, both of you managed to study with students of mine. And I would say that's the journey. But I would also just offer that my destiny as a teacher, and what would ultimately become of me, has become of me as a teacher, was constantly informed by my studentship. And I am first and foremost a practitioner. I would, I can literally count the number, probably less than 100 days I've missed in 43 years of being a yogi. And then I had fever, or I had whatever, I just didn't practice. So practitioner first, student, and teacher last is my priorities.
Yeah.
That's beautiful, by the way, and just the way that you described it. I almost missed my session this morning, and then as I was coming into preparing for our conversation, something in me was just like, you don't need to read, you just need to practice. And I sat there, did about a 20-30 minute meditation. And what you just described was such a beautiful reminder that before the theory, before the talk, really comes being with the practice, being with what we have already learned, and working with our nervous systems. Frankly, sometimes I just look at it as, okay, I just need to calm my nervous system. I just need to calm my body so that I can be with life today.
There's this great saying that the practice is the teacher. And I would offer that we could also even say the practice is the teacher, only because the teacher is already present within us. There's this Sanskrit concept called adesha, which means the first. The first of all our guides is inside. The primary one is the internal one. And practice allows us to have a relationship to that, to the adesha. So it's a good place to start. And I would say, the value of always being a student.
The best teachers I've been around have all said that, which is something I've noticed. They've all said, you're your own master. And that to me has always been a signal of, this person has a lot of understanding in themselves and their practice. Can we go down that route, Rod, and talk about that? I mean, as you're talking about meeting a teacher who lit your life on fire. For me, that was my first teacher, Jean Mazet. I mean, I just look back at when I met her within 6 months of meeting that woman, how much my life transformed. And a decade later, and when you said lit your life on fire, I mean, that was my exact experience of getting around a powerful teacher who had really spent decades with themselves, to then be like, okay, now I have something to share. Can we talk about that? Of just how important the relationship to student and teacher is, and especially in this changing world where it's not the same that it was 10 years ago or 20 years ago or 30 or 40 years ago for you. It's shifted drastically. So I'd love to hear your insights on the importance of that, and how we navigate that.
Wow. Well, I'm glad we have an hour. I just don't know if we're going to get to any other questions. Um, uh, well, let's wind back for a minute. I was just talking to a student of mine yesterday. She called a senior student of mine, who I love speaking to. So we had a nice short conversation, but I reminded her, there's this phenomenon. They've actually done research about therapy, the effectiveness of psychotherapy. And what they found is, and I'll do my best to be as exacting in these findings as I understand them to be, it's not about the modality. I mean, there's plenty of effective modalities, less effective modalities, and they do research along that. But the singular factor in the actual effectiveness of a particular psychotherapeutic model or therapy is the relationship to the teacher, to the therapist. If there's one of deep trust, it already creates the kind of the catalyst of change and transformation is already present. And it's easy to think, especially in this day and age where we have become so incredibly transactional. More so than, listen, all of my peers who became kind of this tier of, leading American yoga teachers. All of them, none of us were pursuing yoga as a career.
Mm-hmm.
But now, I mean, people do that. And so I guess what I was going to say is it's easy to think of the tools that we use in the trade of being professional yoga teachers as effectively a kind of commodity. And if we have a grasp of enough commodity, enough tools, asana, way of practicing asana, way of practicing pranayama, that we make it ours, we're eloquent and able to kind of lead it effectively. It's easy to think of this modality as we have, the more modalities we have, we put them out there. But the reality is not unlike the psychotherapeutic reality, which is it's actually your embodiment of what you're teaching that actually makes the biggest difference. Nick, to hear you describe your relationship and this metamorphosis that happened with Jean, it wasn't just and as we talked about before the interview started, a great love and respect for Jean. I do. She was a very serious student of mine at one point. Mm-hmm. And the point is, she wasn't just sharing techniques with you. She was also sharing her relationship to them. They must have made a difference in her life in order for them to make a difference in your life. Mm-hmm. And so that's what they call transmission. So there is this piece of teacher that is that's expressed through transmission. The teacher embodying it, the accumulation of their practices and their relationship to a particular technique, it gets passed into those who are now they're sharing it with. So that's why a teacher will always have a certain value that a book of techniques can't approach. Mm-hmm. And why it makes a difference to practice with a teacher who has an experience, who's taken ownership of the Shakti, the actual power of it, before they share it. Why you will feel a difference when a particular technique comes from a deeply experienced teacher versus someone who has less experience. It's not the modality. What's making the difference is the teacher's ownership of the experience behind the modality. So that's an element that I would just say, hey, for anyone thinking you don't need a teacher, it's cool. There's a lot of the modalities are available on YouTube. You can get them.
Mm-hmm.
But how impactful are they will depend upon the teacher's relationship to them. So that's number one. But I think there's probably 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or an infinite number of points on the conversation about teacher. Where should we go from there, Nick?
I
was going to say,
Nitin's chomping at the bit. I'm gonna let him jump in.
well, just a small, addition to that, I also feel is like as students, what the level of reverence we bring to the practice and our relationship with the teacher. Because I've noticed I could hand someone a book or send someone a very impactful video. There's lots of great content on YouTube, but if they're not ready for it, or if they're not in a mindset where they're willing to receive the depth, then it also doesn't, it's not as effective. And so I just wanted to offer that as where we are on our journey, and are we approaching the teacher / the content with the level of reverence that's often necessary.
And I would offer another role of a teacher. And again, we're using the teacher, and we haven't really even defined the term, because yoga teachers conceivably are anyone who's teaching yoga, right? You come out of a 200-hour teacher training and you lead a class, and you're called a teacher. And Gene, who has practiced for 40 years and has taught for more than 30 years, is also called a teacher. So what have we done to the terminology even? But I'm going to use, so for the sake of our conversation, let's make a distinction between a yoga instructor who leads classes and a yoga teacher, someone who's actually able to have a higher, not just a skill set in kind of ripening of their relationship to a lot of different practices, but also their ability to be sensitive to the needs of the student. And what I'd offer is part of that is also, to your point, Nitin, which is part of the gift of teacher is understanding at what level or what are the techniques that this student can have reverence for. Yeah. Because you can be a reverential student, but meditating on the breath is enough. I have enough reverence for meditating on my breath. Do I have enough reverence for seeing the cave of the heart, which is a deep meditative practice? Is that something I can do? So part of the gift of teacher, if they are in fact, authoritative and qualified, is also to tune to the student's level of what are they capable of being reverential toward, to your point that having reverence for the practice is actually very meaningful. So that's also the part of the gift of teacher, is someone who has the discernment to identify how to best serve the students.
Yep. Yeah, I believe, Rod, you're maybe referring to adhikara, right? Like you earn the right to know. And there's a piece of that in the teacher that goes, the student's ready for the next thing. And that can sound judgy of like, oh, I'm deciding when the student's ready. It's like, no, there's a discernment of, okay, they've got some foundational aspects to them. They're steady. Now they're ready for a fire practice. Now they're ready to look at the chakras. Or now they're ready for these deep meditations that can really transform your lives. And I'm thinking of years ago, someone had asked me, they said, how did you become a meditation teacher? And I kind of flippantly said, I meditated for 10 years. Mm-hmm. And the person just looked at me like, that makes sense. And it was just this funny interaction of, I sat with myself in a room for 10 years before I felt like I was ready to share. And I think of that of, I've been practicing over 15 years and teaching for 12 or 13 of those. And I'm thinking, right now I'm probably ready to be fully teaching. Where before it was this instruction phase where I was probably creating some unconscious karma in myself and others by what I was teaching, but it's all necessary to get to a place where you really trust yourself too. So I like that. That for me has been an interesting play on maybe being in the room too early, but also learning from that and growing from that. And that I've seen the value in that as well. Wonder what your take is on that, Rod, of how quickly we're putting yoga teachers into the world who
Yeah.
really don't even have their own understanding. It's a really important question.
Yeah, no, thank you. And, as you're describing your own relationship to, kind of what is this, you could call it self-credentialing, right? So we're giving ourselves the credentials. Okay, I'm now a meditation teacher, or I'm now teaching meditation. I did it with this woman on Saturday and Sunday, did a 2-day workshop. Now I'm going to teach it on Tuesday,
Mm-hmm.
versus what you're saying, which is like, I incubated, I practiced for a number of years, decade. And even to this day, I think maybe I could have waited more.
Mm-hmm.
So pranams to you, Nick, for waiting. I think if I wanted to be very honest, I would tell you that I'm a little sad by how quickly people feel they have the authority to teach something. And it's literally not trying to hold people back. And this is not a patriarchal kind of hierarchical kind of thing. This is just respect for the teachings. The idea, you brought up this term, adhikara, which is one of the great terms and a very, very, very vital term underlying the tradition of teaching, but moreover of practice. And that is like, when am I ready? When are you ready for a particular practice? But I'm a father 4 times over. So, anytime you get your kids' presence, there's always a thought about like, well, what's age appropriate? You didn't get them the electric train set when they were 3. You waited till they were 8. You didn't, there was some slides and some things in the backyard that were really good when they were 2. At 5 or 6, they would never get on it again because they had outgrown it. So to think that doesn't apply to us, to the process of evolution that necessarily takes place when we're practicing, and the specific methodologies that create a new, we'll say, kind of a higher level of transformation or a deeper level of transformation, or that would be incorrect. That would be wishful thinking that didn't apply to us, because there is a kind of proving ground. What I used to always say is that, listen, if you do yoga long enough, you're going to change. But in the face of potentially changing, the thought will occur to you, most likely, to stop practicing.
Mm-hmm.
Because change is difficult. At some point, we cross a kind of point of no return, and in which there's a little bit of a void and confusion, and I'm not there, but I'm not there. And you're in between. And to have a measure of stability, it helps to have a teacher who says you are ready, but it also requires us it invites one to consider, have guidance about, well, what's the practice that will help me navigate that change? And again, another reason for teacher. And I think, Nick, we probably need to make the opposite case about, teacher, because I know there's some, in a way, pushback in the modern era against the whole idea that there's a teacher. And, so far we've been making the case for the value of it. But both of you have grown up. I want to say grown up. Both of you have evolved your yoga through strong teaching forces with, strong voices and deep knowledge. So, but we can talk about the opposite, why you don't need one, or if you want.
It's interesting, and I'll let you go in a sec, but there's just things landing for me of, after I had practiced with Jean for years, then she said, okay, now you're ready to meet my teacher. And she sent me off to her teacher who lives in the mountains. And I remember asking her, what's your advice? And she goes, you better put your big boy pants on to go see Dennis. And I remember being like, oh God, what am I getting myself into? And after meeting my now teacher, Dennis Adams, I had 6 months where I was borderline suicidal from the amount of energy and prana and force that this man unlocked in me. And I remember going to Gene and saying, Gene, I don't know if I can continue like this. And it took a great teacher to say, don't, just trust me, have faith that you've got this. The universe isn't giving you anything more than you're ready for, and you're going to make it through this. And it was that void state you're talking about, of like, I don't know what's up or down or who I am or where I am or what I am. But now I look back 7 years, 8 years from now, and I go, wow, what a turning point. And I'm so glad I had great teachers to support me and pull me through when I needed it. But they also never gave me more than I was ready for. They put me to my edge, but there's such reverence I have for that. And Nitin and I have worked closely together for years, and he's had similar moments. And I just love that we're able to talk about this as three teachers in the room. Nitin, what's up for you? I'm kind of dominating here. I'd love to hear.
No, you're good. Don't even worry about it. I think what's really resonating with me is just this sense of how, and Rod, as you were referring to, the teacher having enough practice and enough experience under their belt to know how to guide the student and really bring them along the journey and sharing that which is right for them. We often talk about, what's right in the present moment. And it's that bringing that same sense back into the way we work with our clients, our students, etc. And even as a coach myself, I often see this is like, hey, the client that's in front of me, are they ready for this next bit? Am I giving them more than they will be able to work with and actually learn from, or will it actually hamper them and slow them down further because they're going to get overwhelmed based on what you have seen as past experience? So I'm being with that, and at the same time, I'm also, there's this, as you were talking about the void, I feel like I'm actually, one of the reasons why I missed my practice this morning, there's something happening with changing seasons. There's always some difficulty in keeping practices going, I feel like, at that point. So part of me now knows, okay, whenever I experience that, I go into a bit of a cleanse, drink more hot, warm water, more subtle, lighter body practices, but keeping some movement alive, so I'll do some more sun salutations and so forth to introduce some more heat in the body. And less of anything that might create more instability, avoid all the fried stuff, avoid the things that I know slow me down further. And I'm curious what you would share in terms of navigating voids, because I'm sure they come in all shapes and sizes, but have you seen certain patterns, certain ways of being with voids that help more than other?
The void.
We'll have you on again, Rod. We'll have to have a 3-part series.
Yes.
The void. Listen, I mean, all I can say is it's invaluable to, one, have an expectation that it's coming. As you said, as simple as the seasons are changing. Well, friends, the seasons change 4 times a year. But there's constant, it's constancy, right? The only constant is change. So I would offer, this is one of the things that yoga is meant to be teaching us. And it's such an obvious point made in the Yoga Sutras, right? That of what is the purpose of asana. So everyone, it's nice to have a lot of different takes on it, and it's a preparation for meditation, it's a purification, it's this, it's that, it's that. But Patanjali makes it explicit that the purpose of asana is the capacity for the pairs of opposites to cease to have impact. I mean, now it's literal. So you've got summer and fall, the pairs of opposites, summer and winter. You have night and day. You have good and bad. You have Republican and Democrat. You have blue and red and fear and hope, and it just goes back and forth. And so as those things shift, it's the void. And so what I would say in terms of and in terms of how to relate to the void that accompanies all meaningful change. All meaningful change. There's a void, there's a moment, there's an inflection point. I love how this touch. There was a momentary choice, and just Nick, going back to your being willing to go to Jean and say, "Hey, I don't know that I can handle this," and she, in her wisdom, said, "No, you can't. Trust me." And because she's lived through enough of it, and she's seen what it takes to get through it, and the value of going through it, that came through in her words, and perhaps that was the emboldenment that you needed, and that was really helpful. So you were going through your thing. In the end, having been, again, alive for as long as I have, and having had children, and having had my own life, huge changes in my life, including divorce and all, just huge stuff in my life. Kids in the ICU, and thinking my daughter was going to die in a hospital. I mean, talk about a void. I mean, that's about as that's the precipice that you never can imagine yourself ever wanting to go to or whatever. But I would simply say that over time we develop an understanding that a part of us is indestructible. And it's not an easy thing to know, because it's just not and it's not a go-to thing. We are physical beings, and part of really at the core of our nervous system, the very fundamental think of it is tripping on that we are impermanent. Every time we look in the mirror, we will somehow interface with a little bit of our impermanence. That thing is going to die, but also, you guys are young, but once you pass 28, you have more cells dying in your body than are being born. So we're constantly changing. So it's not an easy reference point, but this is the value of silence. The value of making peace with silence, and what awaits the discovery there is once again a source of constant and endless renewal. And the self, if there is a capital S as in self, or essence of mind, if you want to call it that, it's indestructible, and it remains a constant source of renewal and faith. So I would say to cultivate it, even in the best of times, is to go and get quiet, get silent. We'll remind ourselves that yoga is a path to lead us back to silence, back to the self that's always at rest. And to cultivate a relationship with it, not just when you're freaking out. And then it'll be there when it gets freaky.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is there are you touching at this aspect that we're not immortal, but we're eternal? What are you touching at when you say there's a piece of us that's indestructible?
My favorite definition of the word Purusha, and for those who are listening who are not familiar with the term, or familiar with the term, but the etymology of it is fantastic. Puru means city or vehicle or location or vessel. City, vehicle, vessel. And Sha means that which is at rest. So the soul or consciousness is that which is at rest in the city of the body. So what I'm referring to is my body's mortal. There's no question about that. There's no question about that. But the Purusha, there's no question that our practice has the potential of revealing to us that the part of us is not changing. And it's the one who's observing us living this life. And so that's going nowhere. It's ever present. And so if you can begin to shift your perspective, and instead of seeing yourself as the object you perceive in the mirror, as the object of that, our whole life is wrapped around, if we can stop seeing ourselves and interpreting who we are as an object, Rod the object, or Nitin the object, or Nick the object, father, seeker, husband, partner, whatever it is, and we can experience ourselves as the subject, as the seer, that is consciousness, and that is infinite or immortal, if you wish. It ain't going anywhere. So I want a relationship with that.
It's what's landing with me is this isn't spiritual understanding that you're referring to. This is spiritual experience.
Exactly. Yeah. So I've had this interesting phase of life, but in the last few months, there's this. It's as if the last few years have been leading to what I am now vividly conscious of. Are you familiar with the book *Sapiens*? It's a really quite a brilliant. I mean, a brilliant book, and it basically it's this whole discussion about how we exist, why this species. There were 4 humanoids. Why did the sapiens exist? And it's fundamentally about our shift from biology to cognition. In other words, the way we lived was shaped by our biology. But what sapiens were able to do is they had this cognitive shift where we weren't just our biology. But biologically speaking, here's the thing, is that we, like monkeys, usually do best in tribes of about 8 to 12. And occasionally, but it's not the norm, is there's collectives of about 100 to 150, 120 to 150. But anything beyond that number, chaos ensues, turmoil ensues, and they just don't survive well. And by the way, this is the same neurology that sociologists discovered in human beings, which is that for a while, open floor plans where you saw hundreds of people in an open office space, they realized that doesn't work. We don't do well. It's in source of conflict. So now the question is, well, then how do you get everyone in a football stadium? And how do you have a religion where there's not 150 people, there's hundreds of millions of people? And it's about stories. And this was the cognitive shift that took us out of biology and allowed us to begin to group together. So concerts and religious movements and corporations. They don't actually exist in the universe. Dolphins don't see them. Elephants don't perceive them. They're constructs. They're cognitive constructs. We tell these stories that you and I buy into. Liberal causes and non-liberal causes, whatever. I find myself less and less interested in stories. And no offense to anyone's away, this is just for me personally. But Hinduism is a story. Christianity is a story. Twitter is a story, or X is a story. We tell ourselves these stories, and this is how we stay together as groups. And it's how we come apart as groups as well, stories. What the methodology of these practices do potentially is they allow us to interface with what lies beyond the story. What is actually real without a story attached? One of the things that the Buddha taught is that as we advance in spiritual practice, the interest in ritual starts to fade, as well as the interest in you and your personality. That's actually a sign of your evolution as a spiritual being. And I know that was a long story, but it was a story about stories. But I would encourage people in terms of, like, maybe we didn't really wrap up the whole teacher story, but I would say, in a way, that the story that we've told ourselves around gurus is that gurus can save us. That gurus somehow, the touch, the Shaktipat from a guru, the right methodology from a guru, creates a kind of social fabric around that teacher, around a particular style. I would say that an authentic teacher's job is to help you find that inner self, that inner teacher. And then when you find it, and then naturally what comes out of that is a deep sense of fulfillment, a deep sense of meaning, a deep sense of joy and healing. The teacher needs to be explicit that I'm not responsible for that. So the teacher points you to it with the right methodology. But then part 2 of the teacher's job is to say, that wasn't me. That was you. And it's been a lesson that it's become very clear to me in the last years. It's not only helping people get there, but it's absolutely disavowing your role in them having that new, vital, transformative experience. All you did was show them a path, but the actual path, the harvest of that path was them, not you.
And Rod, that points to this sense of great humility, and also seems like you're pointing to not having your fingers attached to I was the doer for all of that, or are you pointing at something deeper? I'm just curious.
Oh, I don't know if it gets any deeper than that. I would just say, look, I think it's natural. Human beings, even if you look at the structure of our psyche, human beings are looking for self-definition. And I think as long as you have human form, you're looking for self-definition. And one of the ways you define yourself is by the feedback you get. Jung called it object referral. Like, what are the objects of the world telling me about who and what I am? And so even as you have human form, teachers naturally are looking for reaffirmation of identity. It's exceptionally rare. I mean, it's not even rare. It practically doesn't exist. But even the most evolved teacher doesn't still have fear of their own annihilation. Mm-hmm. And so as a result, we're all trying to find little pieces of things to validate ourselves. And what I'm offering is just that, which is to indeed, you called it humility. I don't even know if it's that. I think it's really, it's the B side of what Jung was describing when she said it's subject referral, which is that your validation is not about the outer world. It's about the validation being affirmed by what the essence of you is, the seer. And that's hard work, man.
Mm-hmm. It's just landing for me so much. And I've thought this myself of, okay, if we're all looking for love and validation, more or less, it's like, well, that's what a yoga practice is. It's self-love and it's self-validation, or a meditation practice. And it's like, man, if I can do those things, then maybe I don't need to go out into the world and look for those as much. And I love, Rod, you're referring to like this dissolving of the personality of the ego and the teacher. And that's something Gina taught me years ago. When someone says, oh my God, you changed my life, you say, I'm so glad that worked for you. And I don't know if you've had this. I've had other students come up to me and say, why are you being so insecure? Why are you not, acknowledging what you've done for people? And it's like, oh, interesting. Like, even not letting that land is also triggering someone else and helping them grow. And that's been some really cool moments of, oh wow, I wasn't even trying to do that. I was just putting it back on the student, but
again, I did make a joke of it, but we could spend an hour just on this question of teacher and all that. The reality is, at the moment you're standing in front of somebody or a group and you're dispensing methodology, leading a class, teaching philosophy, at that moment there's this I don't know if I'm comfortable with power differential, but there's a differential. It's no longer a conversation in the same way. It's kind of flowing more in one direction than the other. That space then gets filled with projection, as you just described. Wait a minute, aren't you being too self-effacing? And just as easily, if you made that adjustment offered by that reflection that you got from this person, someone else in the room will go, dude, you're taking way too much credit.
Mm-hmm.
Who the blank do you think you are? So let's just say it's so complicated. And what that is this, stories that we're bringing to the equation in a way like that,
I tend to write a bunch, every other week or so. And one of the things that I've been saying recently is like, there's some who will agree with my expression of X, and there's some who will disagree with my expression of X, and I accept both. That both
like
exist. Not that I'm in agreement with it, but I accept that they both exist. And it seems it's what we're talking about here is really bringing me back to that. It's like, there's like a million opinions out there about who I am, who you are, what you're good at, what you're not good at, what I'm good at, what I'm not good at. And it's like, great, let all that float, because that's all that really is. And I think having that ability at the end of the day, I feel like for me at least, the way I come back to some sense of equanimity is, okay, am I living to my truth? If my intention is to be kind, loving, create more joy than I found, am I being a vehicle for that, or am I straying? And if I'm straying, great, let me catch myself and come back. But as long as I can stay true to that, then great, let's keep living one day at a time.
To bring it all home and bring it back to our home inside. Guys, this has been great. Really appreciate it. We could have gone on forever. Rod, it's truly been an honor. Really, it's just been lovely to talk and listen and hear you speak and share.
Thank you.
Awesome. Absolutely. And we'll put in the notes how to get in contact with Rod. Maybe go to one of his retreats. I was just looking at, you have one in Costa Rica coming up. So yeah. So and as always, if this conversation moved you, if you feel like there's something here you want to share with someone that's going to help change their life, we don't advertise, we don't ask for anything on this show, except for if it's landed with you, share it and help us all raise the consciousness of the planet, one conversation at a time. So until next time, everyone, take care of yourselves.